All right, well, that takes us to the next item on the agenda. Now, we're moving into privacy, cybersecurity, and charities. So this will be chaired by Natasha Sekulic. So I welcome Tash to the stage. We're also joined by Michelle, by Carly, and by David. So as they come up onto the stage, please remember, keep your questions coming using the Slido facility. That's how we're enabling questions from attendees today. So I encourage you to think about questions as we hear from our panelists in this session, and will be then followed by a quick break, and then we're in the last component of today's agenda. Thanks, Tash. I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Mel. And I'm going to try and be a bit reserved because I'm very, very excited. For those of you who don't know, I'm the ACNC's privacy champion, and I have been a privacy lawyer for a large part of my career. And prior to this current role, I worked in cybersecurity. So I am really, really excited about this panel. We're very lucky to have Michelle Cozadinos, who you met previously. Michelle is our Director of Compliance, for those who might have missed that session. But prior to undertaking this role, as Michelle alluded to her extensive history, she was the director, she headed up at the Department of Home Affairs, the Complex Identity, Fraud and Investigations Unit. So she'll give a unique perspective, both from an ACNC perspective, but some of her previous work. We are very lucky to have David Spriggs back with us. David was generous enough with his time last Regulators Day. We're delighted to have you back. So David is the CEO at Infoxchange, a not-for-profit social enterprise with the vision of technology for social justice. He is passionate about creating a more digitally inclusive society, and the role technology can play in improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the not-for-profit sector. So thank you, David. And I'm delighted that we've got Carly Kind, the Privacy Commissioner, here. Carly was appointed the Privacy Commissioner at the Office of the Australian Information Commission earlier this year. Prior to this role, Carly worked as the Director of the London-based Ada Lovelace Institute. Carly is a leading authority on the intersection of technology and human rights, and has advised industry, government and non-profit organisations on digital rights, privacy, data protection and corporate accountability in the technology sphere. So we've got a great panel today, and I'm going to kick off with a question for Carly. Why is cybersecurity important for charities?
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you so much for having given me the opportunity to be here today. Really looking forward to fielding some questions and being as potentially helpful as I can to the audience. I'd start with saying that cybersecurity sounds like a very kind of technical area of compliance, but what underpins it is really common sense notions of good kind of corporate behavior, and in particular good data governance. And I think that is, if you take one message away from the panel today, I would say that ensuring that your data governance practices are sound is possibly one of the most important things you can do in the kind of cybersecurity realm, which of course has a range of other kind of technical requirements and governance requirements to it. But good data governance really will set you up for compliance, either with the Privacy Act or just general good corporate behavior. I say that knowing how difficult it is for charities in the nonprofit sector to kind of embrace this issue, not least because resourcing is always a challenge, but also because this is a complicated area of technical and legal governance. And I want to kind of reassure you that I'm very personally aware of those challenges. I've come from the not-for-profit sector where I've worked for the last 2 decades, and I've spent a lot of time as well advising charities on how to comply with privacy and data protection laws in different jurisdictions. So I really have seen the first-hand challenges But I always try to impart to charities that the effort that you will put into ensuring good data governance and making sure your house is in order will absolutely pay dividends, not only in minimizing the risks that you create for your organization when it comes to things like data breaches, but also in the way you create trusted relationships, including with donors, which is often key to your sustainability as an organization. Increasingly, we see that for consumers and citizens, good privacy practices is a determinative function on how they relate with a business, a corporate entity, and a charity as well. And they want to see you handling their information in respectful and ethical ways. And so, again, investing in those practices as an organization really does pay dividends in multiple ways. I just, by way of kind of, again, high-level introduction, I'll just make a couple more comments, if that's okay, Natasha, while I have the floor. So I know that it's worth saying that I recognize many charities won't be captured by the Privacy Act per se because of the small business exemption around privacy obligations. However, I think as I've just made the case, I do think that trying to understand and embrace the principles which underpin it is a matter of good data governance and good donor management as well. And I'll also highlight for you the possibility that the Privacy Act will be changed in the coming months and years, including by removing exemptions that are there around turnover. So that may mean that many more entities do come within the purview of the Act in the years to come. We know that for those organisations not accustomed to complying with Privacy Act obligations, that will require some uplift, and we, as the regulator of the Commonwealth Privacy Act, will, should we get those powers, will absolutely intend to support charities and other organisations in that uplift process. Finally, I just come back to this question that Natasha asked me about why cybersecurity is important. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner administers something called the Notifiable Data Breaches Scheme, which is the requirement under the law that where an organisation is subject to a data breach that may have serious implications for individuals, that they notify the regulator of that fact. And in 23-24, we saw around 1,000 data breach notifications come through our office. That was a 13% increase on the year prior. And that is in keeping with the trend that there are increasing cyber risks to organisations across the economy. And I'm sure David will also speak to this. In our statistical reporting, we can see that around 67% of those data breaches are attributable to malicious or criminal attack. So that really does establish that the threats are there, the risks are there for organisations everywhere. But also a third of data breaches were the result of human error. And that's good news in a way, because it means that those are things that you can easily overcome through good governance and processes. But 5 of the data breaches we received notification of last year affected over 1 million people. So the potential for real impact is quite immense. I have some other things to say, but I'll stop there, having dominated the floor for now, and hand back over to you, Natasha.
Oh, it's so interesting. I wish we had more time, because I would just love to pick your brain in all of this, but we'll try and cover as much as we can in the time that we have. Michelle, I might pass to you, because we Holly did just mention, that having good cybersecurity practices can be part of good governance. Can you talk about that in an ACNC context? How does this help with charity governance?
Yes, certainly. Well, I think Carly covered a lot of the key points around it's continuing to be an emerging risk for all organisations, and we're seeing that uptick in cyber breaches. Governance is really that mechanism to minimise your risk in that space and maintain trust with your donors. And I can share some details from our recent cyber review, which really looked into whether charities consider cybersecurity, what charities are doing to protect themselves from cyber attacks, and what steps a charity would take in the event of a cyber security breach. And what we've found is that the charity sector did know that there were several government agencies providing guidance and support to them. The Australian Signals Directorate was one that many charities knew about, which is fantastic. We also found that cybersecurity management is very costly, up to millions and millions of dollars. So the larger charities were able to manage this, while it was more difficult for the smaller charities, and they were more likely to outsource those requirements. And whilst charities have a low risk appetite for cybersecurity attacks, unfortunately finding the skill and funding is a challenge. So we saw this really common dilemma across the board about how much should a charity be investing in its management of cybersecurity compared to fulfilling its charitable activities. So striking that balance is an ongoing challenge for the sector.
Thanks, Michelle. David, we might turn to you for some practical tips. Have you got some practical tips for charities looking to improve their cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for having me back again this year. And I'll certainly get to the practical tips, just to build a little bit on what Carly and Michelle have said. I'd like to be able to say that over the last 12 months, since the time we last met, there's been a significant improvement in cyber posture across the sector. But unfortunately, that just isn't true. So we do a report every year. I think we would have talked about it last year, looking at digital technology across the not-for-profit sector, and we've been doing that for close to 10 years now. But kind of looking at what's happened over the last 12 months, despite all of the media attention and despite all of the high-profile breaches, there really hasn't been a significant shifting of the dial. And what does that mean? In our latest survey, still more than half of organisations surveyed. This is a survey of 1,000 organisations. Over half of those organisations still didn't have multi-factor authentication turned on for all of their core systems that are looking after sensitive information. I used to have to explain what multi-factor authentication is. I think most of us probably get that now when you get a code on your phone. But think about that, over half of the organisations we surveyed don't have that turned on. And it's only improved by 5% over the last 12 months. Still, organisations are not doing staff and volunteer training. And so we've just talked about the kind of the human element of a lot of these breaches and a lot of the inadvertent breaches that happen. So still only 20% of organisations are providing regular training to staff and volunteers, despite a massive amount of resources that are out there from ourselves, from across government. And still only 1 in 5 organisations have a plan in place to actually improve their cybersecurity over the next 12 months. So that might be a good segue into why we need to take some practical steps. And if you're the leader of a small to medium charity, I often say, laying in bed awake at night, hoping that it's not going to happen to you is not a strategy. But I think the good news is that there is a lot of resources out there to help organisations get started on that journey. It's not necessarily extremely costly to get started on the journey and to get some of those real basics in place. I'll share in the chat, one of our resources we have is a digital transformation hub for the sector. It's got sector-specific resources. It helps with an assessment tool so you can see where you're at, point you to resources. So it's got an expert bar so you can speak to a real person on how you might go about getting started. And quickly, just some of those practical steps and practical tips. From a governance perspective, put it on your board's agenda. It should be a standing agenda item for all boards. Some people say to me, I'm not sure what we'd talk about at that agenda item. Well, that's a good reason to have it there and start that conversation. To Carly's point, start talking about data governance, understand what information you're holding, where it might be held, what your third-party supply chains might look like. Turn on multi-factor authentication and get it in for all of your core systems. If you're not sure how to do that, just ask the question. Our team can help with some of that, and start with that training for staff and volunteers. Again, there's a lot of resources out there. At Infoxchange, we offer free online webinars, not just for organisations and leadership, but for staff and volunteers. So if you don't think you've got the capacity to deliver some of that information yourselves, you can point staff and volunteers to some of the resources that we've got. So. My main message is, make a start if you haven't already, and then there's plenty of resources to build on from there.
That's great. Thanks, David. So you mentioned some of the resources that are available at Infoxchange. Carly and Michelle, I might ask you from a government perspective, what resources, maybe I'll start with you, Carly, from the Privacy Commission perspective, are there resources that charities might find useful?
Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha. So we publish a range of guidance materials on our website, and we have guidance for each of the Australian privacy principles to really step out what compliance looks like. Some of those are in the process of being updated, in particular to take into account new advancements in technology. We also have specific guidance for charities. And we are again updating this guidance, and we will be publishing that, we hope, in the next month or so. And that has some really key points for it, including what obligations for not-for-profits look like under the Privacy Act, generally speaking, the importance of good privacy practice for not-for-profits, and then how to apply the Australian privacy principles in the context of charitable work. So, for example, a key area of focus for us recently has been the retention of personal information. This is an area that can be tricky for charities and not-for-profits, particularly when it comes to donor information, because there are understandably many strategies at play to re-enliven relationships with lapsed donors, or to reapproach people around particular appeals, for example. And obviously that's really important to the sustainability of charities on the one hand. On the other, the practice of retaining personal information, including of donors, creates real risks both for your organisation when it comes to cyber security threats and to the people whose information you hold. And infinite retention of personal information is simply not justifiable from a good privacy practice perspective. So it's something that we've been looking at recently. We will be issuing more guidance in the coming weeks so that you have a better sense of where the line is on what kinds of personal information you can hold. But the easy takeaway from that is to always recall that if you can't lose information you don't hold, you can't lose data, you can't have data stolen that you don't have in the first place. So, you know, that is the kind of driving factor behind a focus on retention, really, again, trying to minimize the risks that charities face. And we've spoken with the ACNC about disseminating that guidance to stakeholders once it's published in the coming weeks.
That's great. I really look forward to reading that. I know it's a really hard line for charities when they've got record keeping obligations and you're trying to do the right thing under one set of rules, but then you're also being very aware that sensitive information, personal information, is a huge risk at the moment. So that'll be great.
Just to really reiterate that the Privacy Act is a principles-based framework, so there's not kind of hard and fast rules on that, and we obviously do take into account other competing legal obligations to keep and retain data, including under anti-money laundering, counter-terror financing rules and regulations. So that is all part of the consideration. But even then, you know, there has to be a balance, and that's what we really encourage charities to look to.
Yeah, and it's nice as regulators that we're all talking as well so that we can try and have some consistency. Michelle, what resources are available from an ACNC perspective that can assist charities?
The ACNC website has our governance toolkit on cybersecurity, so I'd refer you there. We also defer to the Essential 8 at cyber.gov.au. So that's the mitigation strategy across government, which is really around making it harder for adversaries to compromise systems. We'll be looking to update our guidance as well based on the review that we have just done. And of course, based on any questions today, that could assist us in fleshing that out to make sure we're supporting the areas that you need to hear from as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Now, it would be ignorant of me to not call out, well, we've got privacy concerns we're also in a world where AI is the hot topic of the moment. So I'm going to pass to all of you, but I might start with you, David. What are your thoughts on AI, and what are the things that charities should be mindful of?
Yeah, I mean, there's been an explosion of kind of interest and use of AI in the sector. And I'm naturally an optimist, and so I kind of looked to some of the positive uses of AI for the sector, of which there are many. But we also, I think, need to be aware of some of the pitfalls and how to look at it. In the kind of the sort of first wave of generative AI, we saw from a lot of leaders in the sector that sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt towards artificial intelligence, and some for good reason. But often it started in organisations with a policy position to say, you will not use artificial intelligence in our organisation. I guess our response to that is that's just not realistic. There was a recent survey that showed 68% of staff will use AI in their jobs without telling their boss anyway. So you can have staff and volunteers coming into organisations using some of these publicly available Gen AI tools, even if you're not thinking about AI in your organisation. So our advice to organisations is to think about guidelines for use of AI in your organisation. And so you can really put out there for staff and volunteers, what are some of the practical use cases that might be useful, and then what do they really need to be careful of? And so some of the, the exciting use cases that people are having a lot of success with is things like grant writing, which, anybody that's involved in a small to medium not-for-profit that has to spend their Sunday afternoons writing grant applications, these tools can be fantastic to say, let's put in some bullet points of what I'm trying to say, make this sound better, please. It can be great for marketing and communications, copy, and those sorts of things. On the flip side, being really careful. So a time-poor caseworker in a family violence service, for example, might think that by putting your case notes into a Gen AI tool and getting it to summarize those case notes for you, yes, it will do a fantastic job at doing that, but don't put that into a public tool where you're not sure where that information and where that data is going to go. So that's kind of our message to organisation, is to get guidelines out there for staff and volunteers. We've got some templates for that. So people are aware of, what they should be careful of, rather than just saying don't use the tools. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, David. Carly, any thoughts from you?
From a privacy perspective, the biggest risk to organisations around AI that I see is the interface of personal data sets and commercially available AI products. So things like ChatGPT and Claude and others that are available online. I think the clear kind of privacy risks lie at the intersection of the personal information data sets you hold and those tools, which may enable functionalities for analysis of information, etc. I see fewer privacy risks around usages of the type that David just described, for example, the drafting of submissions or research, analysis of publicly available information, etc. But across the board, I think it's good practice for organisations to consider what process looks like when it comes to adopting new technologies. The last couple of years, it's been generative AI. It will be something else soon. And so therefore trying to ask ourselves, what is the process we need to go through each time we're faced with the opportunity or challenge of a new technical tool? And in that regard, we would advocate for the use of privacy impact assessments, which are a really effective way to just help you step through what are going to be the implications of the use of a new tool or tech on your privacy obligations and good data governance generally. Privacy impact assessments are already required by Australian government agencies. As part of the package of potential Privacy Act reforms, they may become required of other regulated entities across the economy. That certainly is on the table. So we would say it's good practice for organisations to start to get into the flow of doing that now, and it has the added bonus of helping you identify where there are risks that need to be mitigated.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The ACNC is also an organisation that, we're a business as well. And so we also navigate this challenge looking at AI. We hold a lot of sensitive information. So I can't recommend privacy impact assessments enough as a starting point. Michelle, is there anything else you wanted to add from an ACNC perspective?
It's fantastic to hear from David and Carly on this, because it really is such a new area for us, and we know it's an emerging issue for charities. So we'll be working on some guidance as well.
Thank you. Now, as you can tell, I'm so excited about this session that I haven't left a huge amount of time for audience participation, but I know we have got some questions coming in. And the first question that I'm aware of, Mel will be watching Slido, so please, if you've got extra questions, put them in. But Carly, this one's probably for you. I know there was a lot of media attention around Pareto phones and the Information Commission's investigation into Pareto phones. What can you say about that, noting that I know you've got laws that will limit what you can and can't say?
Yes, we do have secrecy provisions under our Act, but there has been public reporting that we've decided to decide not to take further steps to pursue Pareto phones because of the unlikelihood that we would exact outcome for the Australian community, given that the organisation has gone into administration. Having said that, we think it's a really illustrative case to help us bring attention to this issue around the use of third-party suppliers, which is becoming more and more common across all aspects of the economy, of course, and how entities should think about their privacy obligations in the context of third-party suppliers. The Privacy Act does require entities to ensure that any third parties they use are adhering to the privacy obligations that they themselves bear under the legislation. And you can do that through the normal kind of due diligence procedures that you would do in other areas of compliance at all. But I think a key one, and linking to the Pareto phones case, is the need to ensure that any third-party supplier has a data breach notification or data breach response scheme set up, so that if they are subject to a data breach, you and them have a good understanding between you of who will be notified when and who will handle which aspects of the breach. That's a really important thing, and I hope that it's going to become a commonplace feature of third-party supplier contracts. I understand that feels like quite a kind of scary space for many organizations, the idea that you could outsource a function and essentially have very little control over that entity's compliance and yet still bear some responsibility for whether or not they fail on that. And again, it really is a matter of kind of ensuring that your contractual obligations are done in a really watertight way and that you have done due diligence where possible. I do also want to reassure charities and not-for-profits that the fact of entities having been subject to a data breach is not in and of itself a contravention of the Privacy Act. Many entities will be subject to data breach through very little fault of their own, and some organizations may have extremely strong cybersecurity frameworks with data breaches coming from either incredibly sophisticated cyber attacks or momentary lapses in process or technology that don't necessarily warrant an investigation on the part of my office into full compliance with the Privacy Act. So just because an organization is the target of a data breach doesn't mean that we'll open up and try and investigate all of their privacy practices. We have a threshold that we look at when organizations are subject to a breach about whether that warrants further investigation. And likewise, the fact of complying or notifying my office of the fact of a breach doesn't make you more likely to become subject to an investigation by the OAIC. What it does make you more likely to be is in compliance with obligations around data breach notification and able to respond to the concerns of the community, who, after all, are at the heart of data breach notification schemes. It's the individuals we're trying to equip to best protect themselves when their data is subject to a breach.
Thanks, Carly. I think that actually takes us to time, and so that's all the time we've got for in terms of questions. But I think that was probably the most popular question, given that it has been so topical. So thank you so much, David, Carly, and Michelle, for your generous time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Natasha. That takes us to a break, so we will reconvene in 10 minutes' time. Please continue to network, have a stretch, get some refreshments if you need something else, and then we'll come back for the last part of today's agenda. See you soon.